Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have something to talk about today. What we talk about today is it's not April Fool's. It's not whatever Blizzard came up with or this day. It's the announcement of 9.1. The fact that we have 9.1 coming live on the PTR rather soon. So Blizzard has announced that the 9.1 PTR will go up in roughly 2 weeks, meaning April the 12th is going to go live, and then raid testing is going to start likely the week after that. 9.1 is, of course, a pretty big patch when you compare it to your average size patch of this game. You have an entire zone, Korthia, so an addition to the Maw, basically an extension to the Maw. You have an entire new mega dungeon, Tazavesh. You have an entire new raid, of course, the Sanctum of Domination. You're gonna get flying. You're gonna get some, nebulous statements regarding covenants. As per Blizzard's words, embark on a campaign to unite the 4 covenants and together launch an assault against the jailer in his own territory. So maybe by the end of the expansion, you will get this sort of Exodia combination of all covenants. Maybe you will be able to swap freely between all the covenants as time goes on. Maybe dual spec covenants is going to come live in 9.1, something like that. So it is a pretty big patch in size. Compare this to the first patch of BFA. The first patch of BFA was Battle of the Zara Lore, with then the addition of Crucible of Storms. So it was just a raid and a half. You had no new zone, no new dungeon, not really anything happening there, whereas this patch is pretty big, it's pretty large. So the question when it comes to this patch is, of course, now that we have the patch on the PTR, how long is it going to take before it goes live? How long do we have to wait? And that is when you start going backwards and you start trying to draw some comparisons. Okay, how long does it take for a patch to go from the PTR to live? The real answer is we don't know. In BFA 8.1, which was as mentioned, the Battle of the Zara Lore patch, went on the PTR on September the 18th and launched live December the 11th. That was 12 weeks, which is 3 months. 8.2 went on the PTR on April the 16th and launched on June the 25th, which is 10 weeks. And the last batch of the expansion, Nyalotha, went on the PTR on October the 19th and launched in January the 14th, which is a staggering 14 weeks, which is 3.5 months worth of PTR. So if you even had to make an average from BFA, without even counting any sort of COVID pandemic disruption, that was already 3 months that it took you from going to the PTR to going live. So you would have to wait something like mid-July right now to get 9.1 to be released. The reason why I said that we don't know is because it has been volatile for other expansions. It doesn't really follow a specific pattern. Take Return to Karazhan, for example. Return to Karazhan was 7.1. It was the first patch of Legion. The first patch of Legion went on the PTR September the 15th and launched October the 25th. That was just 5 weeks of waiting time. The other thing is the size. I mentioned that 9.1 is pretty big, so you would think, well, if the patch is big, it's going to take more time to be tested. 8.1 in BFA, you just had to test the raid. Now, you have to test the raid, you have to test the new zone, you have to test the new mega dungeon, probably you have to test the new campaign, all of the new campaign quests for all the covenants, so it should likely take longer. Well, the biggest patch of BFA was 8.2. That was the patch that gave us Mechagon, it gave us Najatar, so 2 full brand new zones. It was also the patch that gave us the mega dungeon, Mechagon, and a new raid, the Eternal Palace. Plus, on top of all of that, a new system, which was the Essence system. So that was the biggest patch of BFA, and it was the shortest patch in the PTR, just 10 weeks, 2.5 months. It was a full month shorter than 8.3, than Nyalotha. So the duration of these PTR cycles for these patches can differ, and not always because of their size, because of the amount of content you're supposed to be testing in the PTR. Of course, if we had to take a guess, given the fact that we are in the middle of the COVID pandemic, possibly Blizzard didn't think it would have lasted this long. The added amount of stress and pressure, possibly even more working from home situations for many employers, is going to stretch the duration of these testing for longer, possibly, likely. Let's just say that we don't have many things to be optimistic about the release of this patch. So it does seem more likely that the patch is going to release somewhere in or after July, rather than some sort of surprise early release. What has interested me about the patch that I found weird is that back when it was announced, at BlizzCon, this was the 20th of February, it was pointed out that 9.1 PTR would have gone live very soon after 9.0.5 ended. So 9.0.5 at the time was on the PTR. It launched the 9th of March. So, okay, 9.1's PTR has to go live right after 9.0.5. So it's going to go live the next week, maybe, March 16th. Instead, it's basically a full month after. For example, the last expansion for 8.1, Ion Azekostas, the game director of World of Warcraft, mentioned that 8.1 will arrive on the PTR very soon. That was mentioned September the 17th. That was when the PTR was announced. When did the PTR go live? 4 days later, September the 21st. So it took just 4 days for the first patch of the expansion to be announced to go on the PTR. This patch was announced February the 20th, and the PTR is going to go live April the 12th. That is like 6 weeks worth of wait time before we get our PTR. What is also interesting is that we haven't really gotten any news since then. Since February the 20th, when we actually got the intro about 9.1, which people pointed out, we basically saw nothing. We didn't even see, video about it. We saw pictures, we saw stills of the raid. Hey, we get the new raid, Sanctum of Domination, and all we got was this like weird ass picture of this golem and nothing else. Same for the new zone, a couple of pictures, the mega dungeon as well. We didn't really see anything at all, which doesn't really give you much of any optimism, right? It makes you think the patch is still very far away, since if you don't even have anything to show, right? Well, at the very least, we're going to get to have an idea of how far along the patch production is on April the 12th when the PTR is going to go live. After that, you're going to start seeing the usual stream of news, the usual stream of data mined news and addition to the patch, which we will report on this channel as usual, just like it happened before Shadowlands. The other part that is going to be interesting regarding 9.1 is, of course, something that doesn't get talked about when it gets advertised, when it gets presented, which is balance tuning, right? Numbers, nice. Theory crafting. Of course, when Blizzard presented the patch, they just went for the bullseye. They just went for the flashy things. The new raid, the new dungeon, the new zone, you get flying, and all this sort of stuff. They didn't really start pointing out all of the balance tuning to specs, to abilities, maybe Covenant abilities again after 9.0.5 and this series of changes to specs. After all, unless this is your first expansion, you should be used to this by now. It very often happens that between one tier to the next, there are going to be some changes to certain specs, which are going to essentially turn upside down the strength of several specs. It's very common to see. We saw this in Legion, we saw this in BFA, in Warlords, basically every expansion, every patch, to see something like Frost Mage is the most played spec, and then the patch comes in and now it's Fire Mage. Destruction is the most played spec, and then the patch comes in and suddenly it's Affliction. Marksmanship and then Beast Mastery. So it's going to be very interesting because that's what I enjoy looking at in the game. The theory crafting, the possible power of all the specs. It's going to be very interesting to go through the PTR just to see Blizzard's tentative changes to the state of the specs before going live in 9.1. Another thing that is going to be very interesting regarding 9.1 is getting to see the first edition of our new seasonal affix, because Prideful is going away. So we are going to get a new one. It's also going to be very interesting because Prideful has shaped all of our dungeon runs so far. Right after you got past the +10 barrier, you have basically spent the entire expansion with Prideful. Think about it. When's the last time you killed the first boss of Necrotic Wake in a Mythic Plus key without a Prideful? When's the last time you killed Gorechop in Theater of Pain without Prideful? Prideful has shaped many of our keys, of Mythic Plus keys, for pretty much like 5 months by now. So with Prideful going away, not only is the dungeon going to change because you have to deal with something completely different, but also the dungeon is going to be further changed by the fact that you won't have Prideful, which already affected the way you were doing the dungeon already. What is also interesting is that Prideful is very, it depends which way you see this, but Prideful is very punishing or very rewarding depending on your damage profile. Prideful is very single target oriented, no surprise, right? It's just one guy. So several specs that don't have very powerful single target were being punished by the lack of alternatives because Prideful needed to be dealt with very quickly. Specs like Fire Mage, for example, Balance Druid, for example, just to name two very popular specs from Mythic Plus, had the perfect tools to deal with Prideful, a very strong cooldown that can be useful in AoE or single target for Fire Mage, more so than Balance Druid, while other specs were being punished more. Particularly, for example, we have reported on the loss of popularity of Marksmanship Hunter after their bug fix nerf to Wild Spirits. Marksmanship Hunter has this problem of being very weak, relatively speaking, in single target. After the fix to Wild Spirits, it's even weaker. So they do have, a weakness in dealing with Prideful. Now that in 9.1 Prideful goes away, that is going to be a weight lifted off of a Marksmanship Hunter's shoulders. Maybe it's going to rise up in popularity again. Maybe the affix is going to be something as good for AoE specs as Prideful was for single target specs. Something like Reaping from BFA. The horde of ghosts running to your position, which is going to be, of course, very good for AoE specs. I looked around to see which of the affixes people preferred now that we have to start putting Prideful in these ranks. I've seen many automatically discarding things like Infested, right, and Beguiling, because they were very annoying to deal with, some of which were just not really adding much of anything other than frustration. And then the other two were more debatable. One was Awakening from Nyalota, and the other one was Reaping from BOD. My favorite remains Awakening, because just like Prideful, it did start severely affecting the way in which you wanted to plan your route, in which you wanted to plan your pathing, depending on all the different bosses you wanted to do, the skips that the portals allowed you to do. One of the first attempts at Blizzard of lowering the effectiveness of the Shroud of the Rogue. So that was also quite welcome for many specs, I'm sure. Reaping is more of a case of you enjoying the Mongoloid 2-button AoE mashing. There wasn't really much else to Reaping. I never really liked it. I was never a fan of the first iteration of Legion Mythic Plus, the AoE spam garbage. So I never really liked Reaping, but I have seen many people enjoy Reaping because they enjoy that playstyle. So Reaping was also pretty highly rated. I would put Prideful above all the other affixes except Awakening, maybe even tied to Awakening. Probably not as high if I were a tank, because of course the responsibility, right, and the weight of playing properly around Prideful is obviously much higher on the tank than it is on a DPS. When you enter a key, you just expect the tank to link you the route. So the tank does everything, and you as a DPS or even a healer just get carried along and you do whatever the tank is doing. So there is, of course, much more weight on the tank's shoulder to do Prideful properly. As for this patch, you kind of have to look at this either on a glass half full or a glass half empty situation, because think about it this way. Imagine 9.2, so the patch after this comes in January of next year, January 2022. You're like, okay, do I want 9.1 earlier because I'm getting bored and I just want new content? So I want 9.1 to come out in May, but then it means I have to wait from May to January to get 9.2. So I have to wait something like 8 months for the next patch. Or do I want 9.1 to come out in August? Because if it comes out in August, I just have to wait 5 months for 9.2. So the content is going to seem and feel much fresher. I'm going to have much less of a downtime, much less of a boring period between the patches. Of course, the price I have to pay is that I have to wait 3 more months on this patch. So tell me, which one would you guys prefer? In my case, I don't care. In my case, I think I'm better with August, simply because I have discovered this great trick when it comes to playing World of Warcraft patches, which I want to share with you. The trick is that when you get bored of a patch in World of Warcraft because you feel like you have completed the content, for example, your guild is farming the raid, so you're just raiding once a week to clear the raid and then you're off. You don't really want to push any more Mythic Plus because it's gotten a little bit boring. Maybe you're not playing a very meta spec, so it's not that you're going to be able to even push high anyways. You got your cap in Renown, your cap in everything, so there's nothing else for you to do. My trick, my secret when that happens is, I know you're not going to believe this, but is to close the game and play something else. I know, it's crazy. It's crazy how easy that is. And it has worked for me very well for many expansions. I actually suggest you try this life hack, particularly if the patch is indeed going to be pretty late, so mid-July or something like that. Yeah, you have nothing to do for the next 3 months. Come on. Just go on, play, I don't know, Cyberbug, play Assassin's Creed Valhalla, play whatever new online game Zoomers play nowadays, or something like that. If you are satisfied with the content you have completed so far in the game, you don't really have to keep logging in the game, you know? You're not missing, you're not being left behind, you're not gonna fall behind in artifact, power, weapon, or necklace, or you don't have to keep farming for corruptions or anything. There isn't really much of anything is going to be missing, so just take it easy until the next patch. It seems like a pretty big patch. There seems like it's going to be pretty heavy, pretty full in content, at least from what they showed us. We'll have to see more as soon as the 9.1 PTR goes live. You will get your daily or almost daily reports on this channel on the PTR regarding all the things that get added over time, the raid testing for the new raid, the dungeon testing for the mega dungeon, the new zone, Corthia, the new game mechanics additions. We know that we no longer have the sockets from Venari, we no longer have the conduit stuff from Venari. It's all going to be capped at season 1 item level, so we'll have to see exactly if and how Blizzard plans to add these things in the next tier. Can we have more socket upgrades from Venari for the next tier, or is Blizzard going to plan to make them drop from somewhere else? All of that is going to come in the 9.1 PTR from April the 12th, so we're going to have to wait and see. As we get more flow of news, more flow of data mining, in a couple of weeks we will start reporting on it. As you know, 9.1 is going to start shaping up. It's going to start taking shape, because for now, for everyone, 9.1 is just a couple of pictures, really. We don't really have many other ideas about this patch. So stay tuned for that. We will get to see more eventually. For now, as I mentioned, if you don't have anything to do in the game, just go and do something else. This is my professional recommendation. See you guys probably tomorrow, very likely. And in the meantime, right now I'm playing Neo 2, actually.